before we jump into the more interesting parts of the configuration, you do need to take note of the IP addresses you've been assigned or configured in zero tier, especially your cloud instances, because for your local machines, you're most likely going to use the loopback address, but it's a good idea to take note, either leave this web page open or take note of your IP address assignments for especially your cloud servers and your local IP addresses for any computers you're going to use for control on your local network. You are going to be referencing these in the companion configuration and a couple other places perhaps. So don't lose these. You don't want to be hunting for them later. Okay, let's do some fun stuff with Bitfocus Companion. This isn't a Bitfocus Companion tutorial. There's a gazillion of those on the internet. I've probably watched all of them on YouTube. I recommend you do the same. There's so much to learn. It's an amazing program. I'm actually not running the latest, greatest 4.01 at this time of this recording, but the reason why is that I get scared. I have so many buttons. I'm controlling so many things, so I like to have some time to do my upgrade, make sure everything works, test it thoroughly before I just blindly update. So do that. If you're starting a fresh file, go ahead and download the latest, greatest version, stable version. I'm going to stick with what I have right now, and maybe this weekend I'll upgrade. I don't know. But let's take a look. You've got Bitfocus Companion installed. The first thing you're going to do is click on connections. You're going to start adding some stuff. You can see my companion file. I have a version of vMix here, QTimer, HTTP modules, and I like to control my ATEM, Spotify, presentation tools, auto presentation switcher. There's some tools that I use pretty much every day that I highly recommend you start exploring some of these plugins. They're amazing. The team that builds these plugins, a lot of people do it on the side. It's all open source and free. These people are like the gems of our industry, especially a guy named Jeff Martin. I think he works really hard on the vMix implementation. So if you don't already have it, it's super easy to find it. You just type in vMix. Studio Code's vMix, you hit add. I'm also going to add an HTTP module. Generic HTTP request would work for our purposes today. I think that's all I need right now. So if you don't have those two modules already installed, go ahead and install them to Companion. Just type it in, hit add, and it'll show up on this left-hand side. Another thing to take note is once you install these modules in Companion, some of these modules have some configuration parameters and some of them don't. Generally speaking, if you're running the module, you're running Companion on the same computer that you're using for control, you're probably going to use like a loopback address like 127.0.0.1. Other times you might be controlling resources on your network, which may be a local IP address, or like what we're going to be doing, you're going to be controlling resources on the cloud. So you'd be using those IP addresses that we grabbed earlier from zero tier. But as you can see, HTTP module doesn't have any configuration. But if you look at a vMix module, there's some things that you might want to dive deeper into, especially for performance types of issues. I've run localhost here, but there are a bunch of, and I think 4.0 is even, 4.01 has even more, but there are so many variables in vMix that if you are pinging those and polling those, I should say, and constantly hitting it for updates, especially if you have a big show file with a lot of inputs, you're asking for a lot of feedback, and it's going to create a lot of network traffic, a lot of overhead that maybe you don't want, probably don't want. You should look more closely into some of these settings. Like for right now, I've disabled input layer position variables, input position color correction variables. You can still access these things actually, but they're not polling. So they're not hitting you, creating this traffic every 400 milliseconds, the way I have it set up right now. So if you start to see performance hits, dive deeper into this configuration here for vMix. I've got it optimized right now. I'm pretty excited that it's working really well, so I'm not touching anything here. Other things like just looking at my network, like I could access my ATEM locally if I want to create buttons for that. I can control presentations locally here if I want to run them from this machine or another machine on my network. So just pay attention to some of these configurations if things don't work as you expect. Generally, pay really close attention to the ports that things run on. Make sure you don't have any conflicting ports, because then Companion's not going to know what to do, or it'll hit both of them probably, actually, and your network's not going to know how to respond for feedback if you're both on the same port. So you might have to change a default port if it overlaps with something else. I found a blank page. Page 4 is blank on my Stream Deck. So let's just, what I like to do first is create buttons that I know I'm going to need for every show. So I'm just going to have a way I like to do things. I like to put a vMix preset. I'm going to go to transitions, and I'm going to put a merge button here. I'm going to put a cut button here, and I'm going to put a fade button here. I like to call my fade auto, and I like to put it at around 600 milliseconds. Cut. Okay, so now I have my merge, I have my cut, I have my auto. It's sort of like muscle memory for me. These are where I like to put these buttons. Right now, these are only going to, as you can see, this is hitting my, it's called vMix_2, but it's my local version of vMix, okay? Now, I need to add a button for the cloud version of vMix. There's two ways you can do this. Like I said, there's probably a lot of different ways you can do this, but I know what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm going to use the HTTP module instead of an additional module of vMix. You could do that. You could use another version. You could go back to your connections and add another, add a new connection. Go type vMix. You're going to get Suncoast vMix. Add another one, and it's going to give it another name. It's going to call it vMix. vMix 2, vMix 3, whatever. And then for each button, you could just basically duplicate it. And instead of vMix 2, you're going to make sure that it's on the right version of vMix. This is a free way to do it. It's a great way to do it. All you have to do then is change your new vMix. Instead of using your target host of your local loopback IP address, you're going to use the IP address of your cloud vMix instance, right, that we just had in 0 tier. I don't do it this way. And the reason I don't do it this way is because of the feedback stuff. There's too much traffic. I've found that I've had trouble on shows where I've had latency and things didn't happen in an instant. It was probably user error, meaning like I didn't optimize this. I didn't shut off these variables. I didn't optimize my system as well as I should, but I was in the middle of the show. It was too late to really mess with it. So what I've found that works better for me, I don't like to use this one. I like to use an HTTP request along with central control. So we're going to take a look at how I do that. Okay, you're now looking at central control. I already have some devices already installed here. I use it for my ATEM. I use it, and I'm going to show you how to add some devices because you're going to have a blank screen here. One thing I want to point out, if you guys aren't using central control, this is one of the big reasons why I do use central control. I love the ATEM supersource animator. Joe has a great tutorial on this, so I'm not going to go a deep dive into this right now, but this is a really, really great way to do some really cool animations on your supersource and control it with your Stream Deck using Companion. This is like one of the key reasons why I use central control every day. You don't have to mess with macros in the ATEM software. So check into it. Look at Joe's tutorial on the supersource animator. It's great. Maybe I'll make a little supplement for that someday. But right now, let's look at a couple of modules we're going to add here. We're going to add HTTP listener and a vMix. So let's go, click the plus sign, type in HTTP, and you're going to get two choices, a requester and a listener. I'm not sending HTTP, I'm receiving HTTP, so we're just going to click listener. I want this machine to respond to HTTP requests that I make from Companion. So just grab the listener, click OK. I'm going to click cancel because I got one already. And then same thing with vMix, type in vMix, and you're going to get Suncoast vMix. We don't want remote playlist viewer, that's something else. Click this, click OK. I'm going to click cancel, and you're going to have these two components that we were just talking about. Okay, now we're going to configure our vMix cloud component in central control. So you're going to click on your cloud vMix instance, and you're going to paste in your IP address that you got from zero tier. So remember, in your zero tier admin, you're looking for your cloud vMix instance. You're going to need that IP address. Then you're going to go ahead and log into your cloud instance. You're going to make sure that zero tier is running. You're also going to launch vMix. Make sure vMix starts up. You don't have to have anything fancy. You don't even have to have you can have the default show file running. Just let it fire on up, and then engage this toggle. You really don't have to worry about this once. Once it's toggled, you could go ahead and shut down your cloud instance. You could shut down vMix, zero tier, until you're ready to go again. Once you fire it up again, it will all reconnect. You should only have to deal with this once. Don't toggle this off. Just leave it on, set it, forget it. The next thing we're going to do is focus on this HTTP listener component. Okay, let's draw our attention to the HTTP listener component. You should be able to just toggle this one right on. Okay, there's two things we're going to configure here: the controls button and the get paths button. Let's take a look at the paths first. So when you click on paths, you're going to notice that there's a button name, control type button, and then a control path. This is an internal IP address, okay, that does the mapping. Central Control does some stuff behind the scenes that you just have to basically take this path, and we're going to use this in Companion with that HTTP component. So in Central Control, it's kind of mapping this internal IP address to the vMix that we're going to be controlling in the cloud. That's why we pasted that other IP address in there. But you don't have to worry about that. All you need to worry about is like, hey, button 1, this button press, whatever button we're going to call this button 1, is going to correlate with this HTTP command. Okay, so that's the paths. We're going to get back to that. And then the controls are where we actually map the events or the commands to the buttons. Okay, so as you can see, my button 1 right now fires off that ATEM super source. So we're not, that's already occupied. So let's see if I could find a button. Yeah, let's do lucky number 13. Okay, so button 13 is completely blank right now. Now, if you remember, let's see if I get to it. Yeah, I made a merge, a cut, and an auto. So let's go ahead and make some, let's make these buttons actually active. Okay, let's map some of these transitions in Central Control. Button 13 is going to be a merge, 14 is going to be a cut, and 15 is going to be a fade. So let's go to 13. Make sure you're in your controlling your vMix on your cloud, and we're going to type in transition, and we're going to choose transition mix with duration. And for 13, we're going to do a merge. 13, turn this thing into a merge. We're going to click plus. 14 is a cut. We're going to get back to it. We're going to skip that one for a second. 15 is going to be exactly the same thing. It's another transition, but it's a fade. I'm going to leave 500 milliseconds plus. Now let's go back to 14, which is the take. So that's not a transition mix. It's going to be called the take. Take mix, mix 1, plus. So now we have buttons 13, merge, 14, take, 15, fade. In Companion, we're going to use our HTTP command. So remember, we're going to the cloud. We're accessing the vMix API via HTTP. So basically, we want to send this command. That's going to be our merge. 14 is the cut. 15 is our fade. As you notice, there's a couple of buttons already made here. I'm going to show you how I created them. So a typical show, you might have a one-up of a speaker, maybe a one-up with slides for a presentation. I'm just going to recreate these buttons that already exist. So I'd click on an empty spot. I'm going to go to presets, and I'm going to find my vMix preset. I'm going to go to mix 1 because that's the main mix. And as you can see, there's presets for sending inputs to preview and sending hot punching right to program. I'm going to grab my preview. And I'm going to look at some of the settings. I'm going to rename this to 1UP. This is going to be my 1UP of the speaker. Now, you can name your input by the input number, which I do not recommend. And the reason why I don't recommend is sometimes in the middle of a show, you need to create a new input. For whatever reason, there's a bad crop. You need to, you get last minute requests saying, oh, so-and-so is going to be joining, whatever the case may be. And you might want to move that input around in your show file so you can find it. But when you do that, it will replace numbers of inputs that previously exist. So that will definitely screw up your Stream Deck buttons because the numbers aren't stable. Once you drag and drop, you're going to shift numbers around, you're going to have a big problem. So I don't recommend you use the numbers. You can also do something called the GUID. When you export a vMix file, you can see the XML file, and then every input will have a GUID. It's a little bit more tricky to find. I don't do it that way. I just put the input name, okay? So I would write 1UP. Now, this is case sensitive. So if you have in your show file, if you have something called, 1_up, and you call it 1UP, it's not going to fire off the button. If you have something called, 1_capital UP or 1 capital U and P, and in the show file it's lowercase, it's not going to work. So you have to be very conscious of how you label your inputs in your show file. Mine is actually lowercase 1UP. This button will now fire my local vMix. Now for that HTTP GET, we're going to find a path from central control of a button that's available. For this one, we're using button 10. Once you have one, you're going to paste it right in the URL here. Once you have one, it's really easy to change from button 10 to button 11, button 12, whatever. So we got to make sure that we have the HTTP GET to an available button in central control. Okay, we're back in central control, button 11 in my vMix cloud instance. I'm going to hit search preview, and I'm going to set mix preview by name 1UP_slides. I could have just pasted this because I got it all copied and pasted right. I'm going to hit plus, boom, button 11, set preview 1UP_slides. That's it. Close that one. So now I've got a couple of buttons here. I got my 1UP, I got my 1UP_slides, I got a merge, I got a cut, and I got a fade on the auto. So that basically will do it. Now let's go to vMix and check out our show file. You're looking at my local vMix on top, my cloud vMix on the bottom, and a program called Screen Deck, which is also a open source program. Works really great if you don't have physical hardware. The other thing to take note of is that, there's the same show file on both my local instance and the cloud instance. The inputs there's obviously two very simple inputs. They're the same name as you saw before, 1UP_slides, and they're just super responsive. As I click around my Stream Deck and Screen Deck, they're both nearly instantaneous. Keep in mind I'm recording this, so it takes up a little more resources as well. But it's pretty straightforward. Clicking through, preview, click and cut. It's very responsive. So that's about it, folks. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. This is one way to do it. I know there's lots of different ways. Let me know if you have any questions below.